All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. This morning, my talk is entitled Love is Our Deepest Truth. And it is the third Sunday of Advent with the focus traditionally this Sunday on love. Stephen Levine wrote that the heart has a life of its own. The heart has a life of its own, and that it responds in a way that is often beyond our mind's understanding. And then the heart waits patiently for our mind to catch up. And sometimes we find ourselves loving for no particular reason whatsoever. We're simply in a state of love. And all that comes close to us, we're in love with. So the heart has this life of its own. And that explains why sometimes when I'm out walking at the lake, I go out on my meditation, walking meditations at the lake by myself, and somebody will pass by me and they'll have this big smile and their eyes will be full of light and they'll just say hello. And I find this welling up inside of my heart of love and of gratitude, and my eyes tear up. And I just feel this huge rush of love. It's like all the person had to do was just say a kind hello. And my heart has this response, this beautiful response. Rumi wrote, "Your heart knows the way. Your heart knows the way. Run in that direction. Run in that direction." The mind, on the other hand, sometimes can get caught up in stories of and seeking to be right or finding fault. But the heart, it has this other kind of mind, a mind of its own, and it wants to feel close. It always wants to feel love and feel close. So this morning, I want to explore, what is this mysterious thing we call love? The French Jesuit priest, Teilhard de Chardin, was a paleontologist and geologist. He lived in the early 20th century. And he was one of those early pioneers who saw spirituality and science as explaining each other, not opposed to each other, but as explaining each other and helping us understand the one or the other. He said that love is the very physical structure of the universe, and that ecosystems, think about it, ecosystems and electromagnetic fields and human friendship, animal instinct and evolution, that they all reveal an energy that's attracting all things and beings to one another. And that this energy is quite simply love in many different forms, many different forms. And his view ties into the ancient yogic tradition, which holds that everything began with the great love, capital L, the great love, and that great love is the source of everything. And it's a name for God, it's a name for absolute reality and supreme consciousness. So it's woven into the very fabric of this universe, and it lives at the very center of our being. And we've probably all had glimpses of this great love, right, at times in our life. Maybe we've had a profound spiritual experience. It may be a moment of really profound, deep intimacy, of oneness with a partner. It might be an experience of bonding with our children. But we remember these experiences for years, often for the rest of our lives. They have such an impact on us. And so really all of our experience of human love, it's actually glimpses of the great love. And it's only when love gets filtered through the prism of the human psyche that it might begin to look specific, or it might be limited. It's affected, you could say, or veiled by our thoughts and feelings. And in our veiled understanding, we start to think that love comes and goes, or that we can share it only with certain people. We might come to believe there's not enough to go around, and we want to possess the love we have. So the ordinary mind cannot fully conceive of great love, but it can become still. And in that stillness, it can experience it. It can surrender, you could say, to the heart, the energy of the heart. Every moment in our lives of kindness, of generosity, of compassion, you could say that love is no less real than the great love, but it might be filtered, but it still comes from the source of all love. So really, our spiritual practice is about removing the filters that limit in any way that great love. And we can remove those filters, and when we do, it's like the trickle of love that we were feeling becomes more like a waterfall. We can have this waterfall flowing in and to us and through us, and love can live us fully. So when that happens, we're just spreading love around in wonderful ways. We're just an embodiment of love. So Rumi really put it the best when he said, your task is not to seek for love, but merely seek and find all the barriers you've built against it. So I want to share a beautiful story. It's a true story. It's about a little boy who had no barriers. He was just pure love, as unfiltered and pure as it gets. And it's a story that's told by a hospice volunteer. She writes, many years ago, when I worked as a volunteer at a hospital, I got to know a lovely little girl named Liz, who was suffering from a rare, life-threatening disease. And her only chance of recovery appeared to be a blood transfusion from her little 5-year-old brother, who had actually had the same disease and somehow survived it. And he had developed antibodies that were needed to combat the illness. So the doctor explained the situation to Liz's little brother and asked the little boy if he would be willing to give his blood to his sister. The hospice worker says, well, I saw him hesitate only for a moment before taking a deep breath and saying, yes, I will do it if it will save her. I will give her my blood. And so as the transfusion progressed, he laid in bed next to his sister and he smiled, as we all did, seeing the color returning to her cheeks. But then his face grew pale and his smile faded. And he looked up at the doctor and he asked with a trembling voice, will I start to die right away? Being young, the little boy had misunderstood. He thought he had to give his sister all of his blood in order to save her. And he was willing to. So it's such a beautiful story about how capable we are of love at any age, and that these moments of love are the most beautiful thing in the world. They truly are. And this story is such a perfect example of the scripture from John 15:13. No one has greater love than to lay down his own life for his friends or for his family or for really anyone. The Buddha has a similar teaching. He said, just as a mother would protect her only child at the risk of her own life, even so, let him cultivate a boundless heart towards all beings. So in this Advent period, Christmas has meaning for us spiritually as we birth greater capacity for love in our hearts. Paramahansa Yogananda, one of India's great yogis, wrote a beautiful book called The Second Coming of Christ. And he explained that the second coming was the awakening of Christ consciousness in you and in me. And he wrote, the cozy crib of your heart has for a very long time been small, holding self-love alone. Now you must make it enormous so that social, national, international, creatural, and cosmic Christ love may be born there and become one love. And he talks about our most precious gifts that we can possibly give being goodwill, and love, and being of service to uplift our brothers and sisters. It reminds me of another story, the classic Christmas story about giving precious gifts and the enormity of love behind giving precious gifts. And it's the story, The Gift of the Magi. Imagine you've read it. You've probably seen various movie versions of it. It's by O. Henry. And it's about a couple who are very poor, and yet they love each other dearly, and they want to give each other something very special, something worthy of the great love that they feel for one another. And so it's Christmas Eve, And the woman, Della Young, she discovers she only has $1.87 to buy a present for her husband. I think the year was 1906 when this was written. So she decides to visit the nearby shop of a hairdresser, Madame Safroni, to offer her most valuable and prized possession, which is her hair. She has this long, gorgeous, thick hair. So the Madame buys her hair for $20, and Della then uses that money to buy a platinum pocket watch chain for Jim. For his most prized possession is his grandmother's pocket watch. I'm sorry, grandfather's pocket watch. So she buys him a chain for this beautiful watch. Well, when Jim comes home from work that evening, he stares at what's left of her hair because it's cut so short. She tries to put it in little pin curls, but it's kind of really gone. And so Della admits to him that she sold her hair to buy him a chain. And Jim then gives her present, which is a set of ornamental combs that Della had been admiring for months in a store window, which she now won't be able to use until her hair grows back out. And then Della gives him the watch chain, and he tells her that he sold the watch to buy the combs. So although Jim and Della are left with gifts they can't use, they realize how far they're willing to go to show their love for each other and how priceless their love really is. And I really love this story because the moral of the story is that it's the selflessness and it's the love that is the greatest gift of all. There's so much selflessness in this world, actually. I mean, we watch the news and we get one version of this world, but there is so much love going on that we don't hear about. There's so much love in our community. Whether it's someone taking their elderly friend to the hospital and staying with them all day and into the night, right? The way that people are stepping up. I was watching some stories last night about the tornadoes in Kentucky and the way that people are stepping up to help them. Everybody just, our hearts, feel such compassion for a situation like that. We had our own experience with the fire this summer, and we understand what it is to face disasters. Mother Teresa said it well when she said, we cannot really do great things, but we can do small things with great love. And we find ways to support each other. One of the things I want to acknowledge is that sometimes the holidays are a hard time for people. Sometimes they're a difficult time or a sad time for people. Some people are facing grief and they're facing loss, and so they're not really feeling in the celebrative mood. And so a beautiful act of love sometimes can just be being present with someone, just letting them know, I'm here, I care, I'm right here, and I care. It reminds me of a passage in Winnie the Pooh, where Pooh's having a tough time, and it goes like this. Today was a difficult day, said Pooh. There was a pause. Do you want to talk about it? Asked Piglet. No, said Pooh after a bit. No, I don't think I do. That's okay, said Piglet, and he came and he sat beside his friend. What are you doing? Asked Pooh. Nothing really, said Piglet, only I know what difficult days are like. I quite often don't feel like talking about it on my difficult days either. But goodness, continued Piglet, difficult days are so much easier when you know you've got someone there for you. And I'll always be here for you, Pooh. And as Pooh sat there working through his head, his difficult day, while the solid, reliable Piglet sat next to him quietly, swinging his little legs, he thought that his best friend had never been more right. That difficult days are so much easier when we've got someone there for us. We can be a friend, like Piglet, for one another, The word friend is derived from the Old English word friand, which means to love or favor. So unconditional love, this big love, the great love, is love that never, ever wavers. It never wavers. It is unconditional. No conditions could change it. So it allows and it accommodates everything in human experience, both the good and the bad. And there's really nothing else like it in this world, is there? You know, it's like the sun. The sun shines equally on all. It doesn't decide if you're worthy of sunshine, right? It just shines. It shines on everyone and everything. And so this great love is like that. And it already forgives. Forgiveness already is a given. Because love just loves. It doesn't punish. It never punishes. It always loves. I've got a book I love, The Universal Christ by Richard Rohr. And Richard is a Franciscan priest. And he talks about forgiveness as one of the most beautiful teachings on love. And I think, I think about it, it was Jesus's last teaching, to forgive. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. So often people don't realize that they cause suffering. They don't realize sometimes that because of their own unhealed places, they're propagating suffering. So Rohr writes, forgiveness is often the most powerful display of love in action. Forgiveness is a largeness of the soul. And without it, there's no future or creative action, only the repetition of old storylines and remembered hurts and ever-increasing claims of victimhood for all concerned. So, in the journey of forgiveness, we sometimes have big things, and they require ongoing forgiveness work. It can take years sometimes to fully get to a place where it's cleared, utterly cleared from our hearts. But there's also the day-to-day little things, the littler things that if we can let go of, we can experience a lot more peace and we can bring a lot more peace. So here's a personal story. Growing up, I had a challenging relationship with my stepfather. He was in our lives for about 5 years. And my stepdad had some deep wounded places inside. He had a really, really awful childhood, and he sometimes would fly into a rage, and we all, when this happened, we were all afraid. We were all afraid of him. There was 3 of us kids, and sometimes there would be arguments, and it would scare us. And so when he finally moved out, there actually was a lot of relief in our family. And I didn't see him for some years. But about 5 years after he left, he came to see me sing at a place I was performing. And by this time, I'd come to a place inside where I felt forgiveness for him. I felt forgiveness for his behavior. I'd gotten to a place where I understood that he was very wounded from a terrible childhood. And that, of course, by no means excused his behavior or the violence. But I did get to a place where I felt compassion and I cared about him. And so as he sat there, I sang him a song. I dedicated the song, actually, Come In From the Rain, Melissa Manchester's song. I sang, and the words were, well, hello there, good old friend of mine. You've been reaching for yourself for such a long, long time. There's so much to say, no need to explain, just an open door for you to come in from the rain. And as I sang, I'm feeling it right now. It's still there. It's a memory in my heart. As I sang, I could see that he was weeping. And I was too, even while I was singing. And so on my break, I went over and sat at his table and we talked. And he expressed a lot of regret for his behavior. And I let him know that I forgave him. And it was a profound healing. It was just such a profound healing for actually really our whole family. Really brings up heart energy right now. So there's a poignant quote from Henry Longfellow that reads, one of my favorite quotes, it reads, if we could read the secret history of our enemies, we would find in each man's life sorrow and suffering enough to disarm all our hostility. And I really think it's true. That's why I love that quote, because when we start to gain understanding of what the other is going through, if we can put ourselves in their shoes, even just for a moment, and feel what their experience is or what their suffering has been, we gain compassion. And from there, forgiveness can flow. And sometimes the forgiveness has to be to forgive ourselves. We have to keep ourselves in the love equation. The Buddha once said, you can look the whole world over and never find anyone more deserving of love than yourself. Than yourself. Sometimes the work of finding the barriers to love, that means exploring places where we're not able to forgive yet. Forgive ourselves, forgive others for the big things and for the small things. So yeah, I mean, it could be big forgiveness work, like with my stepdad, but sometimes, a lot more times, actually, it's the smaller things. Small things arise in a day or in a week. And if we could forgive that and let that go more easily, it's really about how quickly we can return to love. I've got a CD called Return to Love, because that's what it's really about. We're gonna lose it. We're gonna go into the mind and all the stories it tells, but then how quickly can we return to love? Sometimes somebody does something that hits us wrong. They say something, it doesn't seem like it was skillful, or maybe we feel they acted in a selfish way, or they weren't considering us. There are going to be ways we feel slighted and bothered, in our relationships, in our interactions. And if we want that waterfall of love to be flowing through us, not just that little trickle, then we need to become mindful, become aware of how we create a block in our heart by saying to ourselves some version of, that person doesn't deserve my love, right? I'm going to withdraw. I'm going to withdraw my love from them. So we do this sometimes in a subtle, kind of unconscious, automatic way. But Charles Fillmore, this is one of my favorite practices that he had. He suggests that every single evening, this is what he did, every single evening, he reviewed the day, and he would notice if there was any moment or any occasion where he might have exiled someone from his heart, or he might have withheld love, or he might have, had a moment of tinge of irritation or resentment, and he forgives that. He forgives the day. He forgives the other person. He forgives himself. He forgives it all, and he holds it all in love. We can see our tendency to want to protect or punish, and we can let it go. We can let that go and realize there's a better response, and that is to hold the situation in a prayer for healing. To just let that be where our mind goes, connected to our heart. When Jesus said, it's easy to love your friends, consider loving the people that are challenging for you. That is the greater love. That is the greater teaching. Sometimes, if we just pray that there's healing between us, that's enough, right? That's already loving. It reminds me of a beautiful scripture from the Bhagavad Gita that I have always loved. And it goes, if you want to see the heroic, look at those who can love in return for hatred. If you want to see the brave, look for those who can forgive. It takes courage to forgive. It takes courage to let go and choose love over and over. So I just want to say one last thing about forgiveness. It doesn't mean that we forget, and it doesn't mean that we condone the past or harmful behavior. We might need to resolve to never again let such harm come to ourselves or to another. But forgiveness is most of all about setting our hearts free, so there is no blockage there, so we can feel that great love like a waterfall. What helps me with forgiveness, when I want to soften my heart and get to a place of being forgiving, is to look honestly at my life and see how, at times in my life, my own pain might have caused, hurt or suffering to others, and realize I'm so grateful for all the forgiveness I've been offered. I'm so grateful for having been forgiven many, many times. And so I want to be just as gracious. I want to live that teaching from Jesus to forgive, so that only love is living in my heart. Okay, so in closing, my prayer is that we all know and we feel that we are so very precious. We are so very worthy of love, and that each one of us are worthy of love, and that we are all cherished. And let us treat each other with this vibration of you are so precious, you are so cherished, you are so dear, you are love itself, and I am too. And we meet in that love. I know that the loving infinite presence wants our joy, wants us to dance and sing and celebrate and find a million more ways to share love before we leave this planet. So let us love one another and forgive one another. Let us befriend one another and see the Christ consciousness in one another. In this holy season, let our hearts flow like a waterfall. May we be happy, and may all beings be happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Kathy.
You're welcome.